Welcome to Conversations with Zaki Baruti, your host, Zaki Baruti. Like always, I want to give a shout out to my biological family, what's happening, to the Universal African Peoples Organization family, what's going on, as well as to the New Life Evangelistic Center family, led by Reverend Rice. Tonight, like always, we're going to have a great show. As always, too, go and share with your family and friends that Conversations with Zaki Baruti is on. Tonight in studio with me is a young brother named Minister Glenn Rogers, who's an activist in our community. And we'll be looking at a very critical issue that impacts the African-American community, or the Black community, and that's the relationship of our community to the police. So first and foremost, welcome to Conversations with Zaki Baruti.
Thank you for having me on, Zaki.
You know, in each of our shows, I like for my guests to share their background so that millions of viewers will know who the guest is, a little bit about their background.
Okay, well, I served 22 years as a Missouri police officer with a first-class certification. I've actually worked in some capacity with the 11 police agencies. I've also been a police chaplain with 3 police agencies. When I retired in the year 2000, I was briefly appointed chief of police for a small municipality on the east side. So for the last almost 30 years, my life has been nothing but law enforcement. Okay,
then, and were you raised in the St. Louis, East St. Louis area?
Yes, well, just like you, my brother, I'm a descendant of the 1917 East St. Louis riots, and I want to thank you for your service because ever since I've known you, when you were running for governor, you've always been trying to make some positive changes, not just talking, but trying to make some changes. So thank you very much.
I appreciate that. I truly appreciate that. And my activism predates my candidacy for governor state of Missouri. In fact, ironically, since we'll be looking at the issues of policing in our community, my very first community involvement came as an extension of what I call the murder and assassination of Fred Hampton and Mark Clark, 2 Black Panthers living in Chicago, Illinois at that time in December 1969, when the Federal Bureau of Investigation, along with the Chicago Police, made a raid on the residence where a number of the Panthers were living. And it came out later on that the police shot about 100 times into the apartment complex, had an agent inside of the complex that had put a sedative in the drink of the person who was targeted, Fred Hampton, and that just disturbed me so tough that I ended up organizing a march through the streets of East St. Louis, Illinois, which, you know, was raised, and that was my very first community involvement, although at Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville. Also, I was part of the Black Student Association movement, seizing the chancellor's office. So anyway, but we focusing on you, but I just wanted to have a little clarity as far as my involvement.
Sure.
So, you know, I know you've been, over the years, very outspoken as a police officer, and what do you see, first of all, in the broad stroke, especially as an extension of what happened in Ferguson, what we call the Ferguson uprising with the killing of Mike Brown? Where do you see the state of the relationships of the Black community with police departments, not only here in St. Louis, but throughout the nation?
I don't think anything has changed whatsoever. I think one of the best things that happened in the last 20 years is the use of the cell phone cameras. A lot of the things that people had reported about the police in the past had just totally got dismissed. They had no way of proving any allegations against the police, and when the police are the ones that the judge and the city council normally see, and they normally don't see this person except now through being charged, who are they going to believe? So, and then internal affairs has always been pro the police department. So that's like another joke too. So I don't see that things have really changed except the reporting. Actually, I do think that the use of cell phones has caused a decrease in the amount of police brutality. And people think that's kind of strange for me to say that, but I really firmly believe that, because I've spoken to a number of officers. In fact, one of my old friends called me yesterday while he was on the street patrolling. And they're very concerned now about the appearance, just the appearance of doing wrong when they are not clearly trying to use excessive force. And these cell phone cameras have made a big difference, because now there is a visible presentation of what happened versus the credibility of the police officer versus the public that nobody ever knew.
Well, that's an interesting point. I'm glad to see the cameras and everything, because as you mentioned, it does bring it out. Whereas back in the day, it's our word against their word, but you do have visual. However, though, how do you explain away the situation in South Carolina where this brother was running away from the police and he shot him in the back several times? Yet, and it was shown that he went back to get a taser gun to plant on the brother that he had just shot, and he was not found guilty through a jury trial. So, as well as the brother that in New York, where it was videoed that they were doing a chokehold and nothing came of that.
Eric Garner.
So, yeah, Eric Gardner. So, how address that real quick?
Well, in my opinion, the killing of Eric Gardner is probably one of the most visible abuses of police brutality, of police use of force ever, because everything that the judge or jury or any administrative body would need to find the cops guilty was not even used whatsoever, but they exonerated the officer, and in my opinion, there was absolute murder. The chokehold was an illegal chokehold in that state, and it was still used. When a police officer violates what the department has given him as guidelines and says that you cannot use a certain thing. For example, some departments got rid of the slapper, which was the leather, the leather little casing that the cops used to have with lead inside of, and they would slap people with it and so forth. And then some of them got rid of the PR-24, the plastic one came with the collapsible steel baton. Well, whatever they issue as a guideline is what you must use. So this particular officer chose to still use that chokehold on Eric Gardner. And it's just insane. Let me tell you something, Zaki. When I was in the academy, Rodney King was beat. And we sat and watched that while I was in the academy. And you know what everybody there said? The police officers that were already training, doing recurrent training, the new guys like myself, and also the staff, you know what they said? Somebody's heads are going to roll. Because it was clear to all of us that that was excessive use of force. It didn't take all of that for one man to be subdued and to be arrested. So the fact that he got off is just an indicator that in the higher levels, there's this approval of the abuse against of black people by the police. It's on higher levels than the cops themselves.
And on that note, we're going to just take a quick break, and then we'll come back and we'll look at how your involvement in trying to make a change as a police officer on the various forces that you've been on.
Be strong and of a good courage. Fear not, nor be afraid of them. For the Lord thy God, he it is that doth go with thee. He will not fail thee nor forsake thee. When the poor and needy seek water, and there is none, and their tongue faileth for thirst, I, the Lord, will hear them. I, the God of Israel, will not forsake them. And be content with such things as ye have. For he hath said, I will never leave thee nor forsake thee. So that we may boldly say, the Lord is my helper, and I will not fear what man shall do unto me.
In front of the 1411 Locust Building, we have the statue of the homeless Jesus. Neighbors don't want the homeless around. They want to do everything they can to drive them out of downtown. And I saw this happen firsthand. I'm Larry Rice, director of the New Life Evangelistic Center, how the system can actually create chaos and then want to blame it on the work of God. We have all these homeless people that have come forth and testified the fact that the police actually encouraged them to go and sleep between the 14th and 15th block on Locust prior to the cease and desist order taking effect at the New Life Evangelistic Center. They let them sleep out there for weeks, even months. And then once that order was given, they went out there with the police sweep and chased them all off. Well, now there may not be homeless people around there, but they're sure hurting, and they're in many different locations. We believe that it's very important that we can get back into this 1411 Locust building as soon as possible. And that's why we have all different types of repairs that are taking place. The problem is if the city keeps adding to their list because they're trying to perpetually keep us out, then we're going to have to go to court with this whole issue. That's why I'm asking for, number one, your prayers, and you continue financial support so we can make the repairs. And number three, a legal process that's so absolutely essential at this time that's far beyond the 1411 Locust building. It relates to groups all over and churches all over that want to reach out in response to the scriptures and let the light and love of the homeless Jesus, who said that foxes have holes and birds have nests, but he, the Son of Man, had nowhere to lay his head, to live through them. We're striving to do that at New Life Evangelistic Center. Even though the 1411 Locust building is presently closed, we're doing everything we can to help homeless people. Some we're taking to Winsville, Missouri, getting them into hotel rooms where they're finding jobs right away. Others we're getting a wide range of training programs. We're helping them with literally hundreds and hundreds of Metrolink bus tickets so they can get out and find jobs and all different types of emergency supplies. And all this is possible because of those of you that are praying, caring, and sharing with the New Life Evangelistic Center. So please send your gift now to P.O. Box 473, St. Louis, Missouri 63166.
Welcome back to Conversations with Zaki Baruti. In studio with me is Minister Glenn Rogers, a former police officer, and we're looking at policing and the police relationship with the black community, not just here in St. Louis, but across this country. On the other side, you were citing Eric Gardner incident, Rodney King incident. Also, as a former police officer, I know you had to ride the centerpiece in the sense of trying to protect our community and seeing some instances of police violence that you would probably not agree to. But also I know that you were in the forefront of alleging some police department corruption. And in fact, the St. Louis American did a real heavy article about your allegations. Explain what was happening in that situation.
Well, when I initially started off as a police officer in my probationary period, I noticed that all of the arrests, all of the ticketing was issued toward black people. I became a police officer because I got tired of being stopped as a cop, as an insurance agent in St. Louis County. So my entry into law enforcement was different from the beginning. I actually made less money than I did as an insurance agent when I came into law enforcement. But when I got into law enforcement, when we went to the academy, I heard so many things and I learned so many things about the laws that I knew had to be taught to people. And I said, it's criminal. I hear I've done a lot of things. I've gone to college of pharmacy, went to several colleges, all this stuff, and nobody ever taught me anything about the law, the fine line of the law. What is assault? What is resisting arrest? What is failure to obey? And I said, well, in my opinion, this has definitely been done to give the police department an advantage, a totally unfair advantage, in my opinion. And throughout my career, I saw so many people arrested because they did not know that what they were doing was wrong. Many times, particularly with African Americans, they are in the heat of a situation where they're oppressed anyway. They're trying to get some justice. They're trying to explain themselves demonstratively, right? And in the process, maybe a cop will grab them like that and they'll jerk away. Now they got resisting arrest, when in reality, they could have maybe stood there. So this is why, Zaki, this is why you have that other document in front of you there, because after I left law enforcement, I was determined to try to do something to educate people on what they need to know to avoid these crises.
So just going back to the police department corruption, so your allegations was that black people were being disproportionately stopped for ticketing and what have you. And let me just say that each year, you probably already know, that it's been mandated that the Attorney General's office is to do a study as to whether or not black people are disproportionately stopped on the highways throughout the state of Missouri. And every year that is a reality. So that's statistically proven. But you also just made mention, and let me salute you for standing up while as a police officer to make those allegations at that time. But also you were making mention of I guess it's a DVD that you have done that says Inside the Law, How to Avoid Traffic Arrests and Tragedy. What are you trying to say in that DVD?
What I did, Zaki, is I went through every scenario that I could think of, hundreds of times, of what the average person does wrong when they deal with the police. What is the psychology of the police? How do police function? What makes them talk to you like they do? And when you understand the whole parameters of why a cop gets out the car like he does. For example, I tell people that whether he's a good cop or a bad cop, his number one job is to, first of all, go home that night. So if you put yourself in that situation where the good cop wants to go home at night and he doesn't know what you have, then you can begin to understand maybe why he's apprehensive, because they do get killed. I remember when I was about 12 years old, the last thing I wanted to be was a cop. I had a family member that was in the DEA, and I could have gotten a very good job with them, but I never wanted to be a cop.
DEA, Drug Enforcement Agency.
Yes,
okay,
yes.
Go ahead.
But I didn't want to be a cop at all because I saw, I opened up a door one day of a church, and they were having a funeral, and this police officer was laying there in the coffin, and with his hat on and everything, and it was, to me, I just couldn't understand what kind of job is it that a man's got to die in order to, to make a living for his family. So I never wanted to be a cop. So people got to understand that that does happen. But on the other hand, my biggest concern now is the fact that cops are not being found guilty and punished for the wrong they do. And this idea that all cops are good because they have a uniform on is insane.
So on that note, we got to take another quick break.
Okay.
We'll be right back.
When I was hungry, New Life Evangelistic Center has fed me. When I needed clothes, he clothed me. And when I needed a bed to sleep in, he also provided that. And I'm grateful, very grateful, to New Life Evangelistic Center.
You all are just blessed, and we just need, help sometimes.
I thank the Lord for Larry Rice because he helped many people like me that's on disability, needing help. Without him, I don't know what I would do.
You need help, you come down here and they will help you. That's all you have to do.
We found ourselves nowhere to go, and New Life was an independent shelter, which means, you didn't have to go through the Housing Resource Center. You could just come in.
They helped me, to keep me off the cold, give me a place to sleep, eat. They clothed me, and they helped me solve my problem.
If you're one of the many people that have helped the New Life Evangelistic Center at 1411 Locust, and now you're asking, what can we do to help? Where can we bring our care kits? How can we respond? Well, we want you to know that our new headquarters is at 2428 Woodson Road in Overland, Missouri. The New Life Evangelistic Center's administrative offices there, our renewable energy offices are there. So it's 2428 Woodson Road in Overland, Missouri. So if you need directions, call us at 421-3020. We're quickly working to get back into the 1411 Locust building. Major repairs are taking place. We want to get the necessary permits in order to get back in, and for our daytime services, we're moving through the courts to do the overnight services, but all this takes time. So in the meantime, while our teams are out on the streets and people want to plug in, they want to volunteer, they want to help, they're asking where can they do it, call us at 421-3020, and they'll give you directions to 2428 Woodson Road in Overland, Missouri. That's where the New Life Evangelistic Center headquarters is now located. We thank God for those of you that are praying for us during this difficult time, and all of you that continue to support. What a blessing you are.
Give generously to the poor, and do so without a grudging heart. Then because of this, the Lord your God will bless you in all your work and in everything you put your hand to. There will always be poor people in the land, Therefore I command you to be open-handed toward your brothers and toward the poor and needy in your land.
Welcome back to Conversations with Zaki Baruti. In studio with me is Minister Glenn Rogers, a former police officer, as we're discussing the police and the black community relationships. On the other side, we were looking at all the problems that the black community face, as well as you have a DVD that says Inside the Law, How to Avoid Traffic Arrests and Tragedy. If anybody is interested in this DVD or having you to come and do seminars or what have you, lectures, how would they be able to get in contact with you?
Well, they can contact me with my email address, glennrogers84, that's GLENNROGERS 84 at gmail.com. But they can get that on the electronic download if they go to www.blackdriversmatter.com.
Say it again, that last
www.blackdriversmatter.com. And they can electronically download it, or they can buy it for with 2 CDs. But I prefer that they do the download because it's simpler.
Okay, so there's 2 parallel issues that we're looking at. How do we respond to being stopped by the police, as well as police harassment, violence, as we see it? Quickly, what would be your solution to the many problems of policing in our community?
Okay, I was asked this after the Baltimore uprisings, and my answer was this. You got to take it all the way back to the source of power in the black community. There is no penalty whatsoever when black people are done wrong. That in itself is the core issue. You can do anything to black people and get away with it. That's the biggest issue we face. Now, who has the power in our community to start the ball rolling to make sure there's some repercussions for doing a black person wrong? It's got to go all the way back to this one person, and that's the preacher. The pastor has the people in his hand, and he can get them to boycott, do a sustained boycott anytime he chooses to. But unfortunately, Reverend is turning his back on the very people that are paying him every doggone Sunday. And I hate that. You know, when the politicians get into office, or when they're trying to get into office, they'll come to the Reverend and they'll say, hey, we need a certain number of votes. But when there's a police problem, we can't go to the Reverend and say, now use that same authority, Reverend, and help solve this problem. Normally, he's nowhere to be found. I say that if people would begin to boycott the money coming into the church, you don't have to ask Reverend to get interested. You boycott, and I hate to say it, but something's got to be done. Stop that flow of money. Stop the diamond ring, stop the trips out of the country, and Reverend will give you the attention you want, and he will organize if you force him to do so, because he has the power to do it immediately. Well,
that's a powerful strategy to address those issues, but let me also add, in terms of the overall objective as we see it as an organization, Universal African People's Organization, well, we say that if you look at all of the police forces across this country, there's a disproportionate number of white officers working in our community. So we say to help solve the problem, what we need to have is what we say community control of the police departments, which simply means that wherever percentage, the ethnicity of a police force are to reflect the ethnicity of the community in which they work. The officers are to live in the community in which they work, and there ought to be effective civilian review boards. And we say that going back to Ferguson. In Ferguson, at the time of the protests, and we were out there in the forefront, Ferguson, a community of 67% black, yet the police force of 53 officers, only 3 were black. We as a people are paying others to come in and harass us. So that's a critical issue as far as solving the problem. But as you say, as a strategy to get us there, I totally salute what you just advocated. So ministers that's out there listening, you got to get out in the forefront to make change. Am I right or wrong?
Absolutely, they must.
Okay then, and again, on that note, we'll just take one last break and then we'll be back to conclude the program.
Yes, the injustice is so prevalent in our community at this time. The rich getting richer, the poor getting poor, the high rises all around us. So much money for downtown St. Louis, where other areas of the community are totally depleted. The great divide on Delmar Street, where we see the Central West End getting so many tax abatements, and the North Side being just ripped off and robbed, and murder rate going up. What can we do? We can pray. Jesus speaks of the power of prayer and the need to pray for justice at this particular time. Luke chapter 18, 1-8, let's believe God for it for our particular community, where the woman goes and knocks on the door of the unjust judge until he finally gives in. Let's go to God in prayer. Jesus said, whatever 2 or 3 agree here on earth, it shall be agreed upon in heaven. Let's pray for justice. That justice doesn't mean just us. Let's begin to pray for the fatherless, the widow, the hurting, and the homeless people that are suffering in our community at this time. Let's believe God for miracles at this time, that the citadels of injustice and the high rises of injustice will come down, and God's love and mercy will spread, that churches will begin to open their doors, that women in need will begin to receive the help that they need, that God will touch the hearts and minds of each one of us as we surrender ourselves to our Lord and go forth in His power and presence, being instruments of justice and help.
Now is the time to pray. And as you're praying, please remember New Life Evangelistic Center and its daily work among the hurting, the hungry, and the homeless. Remember the Bible, ask and it shall be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and it shall be opened to you.
Welcome back to Conversations with Zaki Baruti. In studio with me is Minister Glenn Rogers, and we only have a few minutes that's left. On the other side, I was sharing with the listening audience about our concept of community control of the police, and off air you wanted to make a response to what we are advocating. Yeah, well, in certain areas, Zaki, you do have proportionate community control with ethnically proportionate black officers in the black areas. But here's the problem. The problem is that when there's a complaint against white officers, take St. Louis County, a lot of the little munis out here, there's quite a few black officers, and still there's no punishment done when there's clear violations of the law against black people. So the politician is not doing anything to make the mayor and the electoral board take that action against the white officer or the black officer if he does wrong. And so how do they get into power? Well, the elected people get into power through votes. And a lot of time the votes go back through the numbers of people. And who holds the number of people in his hand? The reverend, the preacher. So this is why I say that we're going to have to start with the preacher, because he can affect the change by affecting the people who are elected. They want to stay in office, and all he's got to do is turn against them. And the elected people, just like with Ferguson, when they told the cops in Ferguson to stand down, people were almost spitting on the cops and nothing would happen. So that shows you that the elected officials are the control. Those are the wizards behind the curtain that control everything, and we've got to make them respond. So you're in essence of saying there's two key components of our community that needs to be functioning at a higher level to deal with police misbehavior in our community. And again, those are the ministers as behind the pulpits, as well as those who are elected to serve us. Absolutely. Okay. And on that note, though, again, because I know this DVD is a very powerful DVD in terms of inside the law, how to avoid traffic arrests and tragedy. And we got to teach that. So if anybody want to reach out to you, how again do they reach out to you? They can either call me by phone, 618-250. Go slow it down now. Some people want to get their pen and write it down. 618-250-4169 or glennrogers84@gmail.com. That's GLENNROGERS84@gmail.com. Or they can go to www.blackdriversmatter.com. We got about 30 seconds, 20 seconds response, closing statement. We have got to act, and we've got to realize now that injustice is coming from black officers and white officers, black people and white people, so we need the righteous people of all colors to stand up right now. And you've just heard that from Minister Glenn Rogers. In order to make change, everybody needs to be involved. It should be a badge of honor that you vote at every election, as well as be part of an organization that's speaks truth to power. On that note, you have been listening to Conversations with Zaki Baruti. God bless each and every one of you. Thank you.